Hello and welcome to the second of our post-event sessions, where we're looking back over the workshops that were undertaken during the Inclusive Futures event that finished 2 weeks ago. Last week we had a presentation of some of the hybrid workshops that were done partly online and partly in person in Shanghai. Today we have a session on India, or the Indian subcontinent, should I say. It includes also Bangladesh. And next week we have a session where we're looking at Africa and West Asia with two of our team, Aya Riyad and Ahmed Hassab. Today I'm delighted to welcome Ripple Patel, who is a graduate of the AADRL, like others members of other members of our team. He's just moved back to London to work with Zaha Hadid Architects, and a new chapter is opening up in his life. Before we actually start, I just want to make one brief announcement. That is to say that will be recruiting other team members over the next couple of weeks to try and build up our team, to enlarge the team. We've got a wonderful team of dedicated volunteers, very, very talented individuals, each of them in their own right. And the idea is that we would like to sort of bring in some more, ideally young, let's say PhD students at an early stage, really committed to architecture, and some people who have a passion and a desire to kind of help the whole Digital Futures project and to take us to the next level. So if you're interested in that, please send a copy of your CV to info@digitalfutures.world, and we'll be in contact. So I'd like to welcome Ripple, who is the chair for today's session on the review of the workshops from the Indian subcontinent. Welcome, Ripple.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, everyone in India. Good afternoon to our viewers in Europe, and very, very good morning to all our friends in US and South America. I'm Ripple, the regional manager of India at Digital Futures, and today we will be presenting some workshop highlights from the Inclusive Future event, our Digital Future annual event 2021. Um, we have here our instructors who would share about their workshop objectives briefly and share some interesting works of students. They could talk about their methodologies briefly and share their journey at the Inclusive Future Festival. We have 4 presentations today. We have our instructors who taught their workshop at Inclusive Futures. I'm sure our viewers are already aware of the names who will be sharing their workshop highlights today. However, I would like to take this opportunity and introduce them in the sequence of their presentation. We have here today Daniel Escobar, who taught Intro to AI for Architectural Design Exploration, which aimed at exploring deep learning models in design. Second, we have Shusmita Biswas and Piyush Kumar, who taught the formula in natural creation and formulation architecture. Third, we have Takbir Fatima, who taught Fractal 30.0 analog algorithm in to explore generative and form finding methods using computation and design research. And last, we have Parveen Kaur and Sujay Kumarji, who taught Machinic Craft, directed towards constructing toolpaths for additive manufacturing processes. I have been talking to all of you guys, all the instructors, but this is the first time that we are meeting virtually face to face, I think. So welcome everyone. I'm glad to have you all today. So to initiate this presentation series, I would like to call upon Daniel, just to give a brief about Daniel Escobar. He is an architectural designer with masters in computer science. His interest lies in using machine learning to design creativity. The workshop that was held with his co-tutor Mayur Mistry introduced an approach of combining several types of deep learning methods um, to generate creative outputs. By combining these different models, a pipeline can be developed to generate novel outputs. So Let's have Daniel, and Daniel, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Ripple. Um, Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel. Thank you, Ripple, for that introduction. I also want to thank my co-tutor, Mayor Mystery, and the whole Digital Futures for allowing us to hold this workshop. So I will start now with the presentation. So when we looked at this workshop, Mayor Mystery and I were looking at a way to implement several deep learning models and how do we use them in a combinatorial plug and play method where we can generate like novel outputs. One of the reasons for this is that traditionally we just see them being used kind of like as a one-off. So like you would use one model and then get an output, but what if we combine them, and then since different models have different sort of properties, can we generate some sort of novel created output? And the whole idea behind this was to develop a process. So essentially you have like the human designer, as in he would give the inputs to this pipeline, and then he could stack these models together and generate some sort of output that then he can evaluate and readjust either his input, or he can readjust the model. So along the way, he can, let's say, like the parameters. So we thought this was an interesting way of approaching this, and we took 3 different types of models that we found were interesting at the current time in deep learning that can be used to explore this method. 3 machine learning models in use that we explore are neural style transfer, which takes an image as input and then it outputs another image. So this is a way of taking the style from an image that you might like and then translate it into another image. Another method that we used was CLIP, and CLIP is a more recent model developed by OpenAI in which combines text and image. And thanks to OpenAI for the pre-training of this huge model, we can then take an image or a text and put it into CLIP model and then get out a text describing the image. And then finally, we decided to combine both a generative model, a visual generative model called VQGAN, and then the CLIP model, where we can now input text and get in as an output an image, or we can combine text and image and get also as an output an image. These are some of the works from the students. So in this example, you can see style transfer. And what's interesting about what this student did is that he took image from online, and then he had an image from his own creative work, and he combined the two because he wanted to show the results of what happens with this combination. So this was kind of like one of the first lessons that we were thinking, how can you take your own data set and combine it with these models? This is another work from him, and you can kind of see some interesting qualities where he also keeps using his own work to develop these sort of outputs. So I thought that was one of the most interesting parts about this. Another student, she also took, let's say, drawings from fashion and then combined them with facades of architectural buildings and also some urban context. And she wanted to explore just kind of what kind of visual qualities these results, these inputs can produce. And it's kind of very interesting that she, one of her insights was that it not only applies to like architectural design, but it can also apply to other creative design like fashion design. Next, we have Milan Denny, who he essentially inputted this image into a clip model, where the clip model, after being optimized to generate a description of the image, generated these text on the right side. And you can kind of see what the sort of text that it generates, that it actually is able to recognize like some sort of architecture text, and then like Saha architects as related to this image. So what makes this interesting is that the clip model was trained on millions and millions of data of images and text combined from the web by OpenAI. So in a sense, it's kind of like building like a sort of repository or consciousness of what occurs on the web, and it's able to recognize these sort of images. Another one is this image of Hogwarts. And what's interesting about this one, which surprised like the students as well as the tutors, is that we noticed that sometimes it becomes very accurate in the description. For example, it describes like Hogwarts and know what it is, but then it also adds like VFX or screenshot, which is another interesting idea, that it also understands that it was created for some other reason besides like the movie. So it begins to add these sort of curious descriptions to it. And next, this is an example of finally combining VQGAN and CLIP. And what we have here is that you take text as an input. So this student inputted a futuristic building from above, and it was able to generate this image. And it sort of looks great, but you can kind of see that it understands sort of like the camera perspective, and it also understands that it's trying to make some sort of building on a site. So this is another interesting approach. Another example is this image, which takes as text futuristic building on Mars. And what's interesting when you combine both the CLIP and the VQGAN model is that essentially the VQGAN is generating an image and is being encoded into the CLIP model, which now takes the text and the image encoded vectors and compares them for the similarity. And then you get this sort of combination. So it's very interesting to see what it finally outputs as the result. And you can kind of tell more or less that it's adding some things related to Mars. So it understands a bit of the way of what it's sort of trying to get at. Another example of this is the student combined a highly, it gave us an input text, a highly detailed urban design mixing between nature and functionality. So you can kind of see some aspects of that here. But what's interesting is that it takes very broad input, and due to sort of like the model's ability to just synthesize data, it can sort of begin to form certain patterns and things that are related to that text. So I think that's what makes combining text and image powerful. Another example is using this text, hyperscale party for demons in Turkish by the student. And this is a video generated from that sort of input, where you have some sort of qualities related to that text. So it's kind of curious, essentially, what the output is. Like when you input this into the model, you don't really know what you might get. So when you see it, it's kind of like that surprise, like, wow, like this is actually what it understands. Another one by Ricardo is this image video that takes text, urban area, and Mars. So you can see how it converts like a traditional sort of urban image and begins to add like the scent to it. So it's interesting that it does understand those things. So that's kind of like one of the aspects that we were trying to like bring forward, is that once you begin combining text with image, the text can guide the images in a way that it was previously, let's say, not unlocked with, like, if you use like a standalone model like a StyleGAN. This is another output from like a text input as a street market. This is another video, but with text input as futuristic temple in India. So these are sort of frames that are generated in a sequence, and what the model is trying to do is just optimize those frames to match and be related every time with that original text input. And this is generated based on text, a house in Bali with a pool. So what's interesting about this is that it also takes some water, nature, and then some traditional features of like a Bali house, and is able to like put them in like some sort of composition. Finally, this was an output from one of the students, Fabio, who he sort of went and tried to develop his own pipeline based on like the methods that we use. And his input as a start in this pipeline was to use a sketch he created and then feed it into all these models and then generate a final output. So in here you can see the original sketch he created. Next, he inputted into the clip model for a description. And then he took the descriptions that I guess best suited what he wanted as a designer or most intrigued them the most. And then he fed those descriptions into the VQGAN model to generate the base images. And then finally, once he had the base images generated, he used style transfer to transfer those images into the original sketch. And then you see what the output that he got was. And finally, this is a video that he got his style transfer images from and sort of like the inspiration for sort of developing this pipeline. And finally, I just wanted to invite everybody, myself and I with the OLA team, we won this competition. We used some of these technologies in a virtual environment in Sansar, and we developed this 3D virtual building. It's called Poder de la Data, and it will be exhibited online, so you can check that out. Finally, I want to say thank you again to the Digital Futures team and to all the students that participated, and to Mayor Mystery for helping create this fun and great workshop for everybody to enjoy. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Daniel. Really unique output, very creative and kind of tripping.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your success, and to all the participants who had an opportunity to be a part of this workshop. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yep. So next up, we have Sushmita Biswas and Piyush Kumar. Just to give an introduction about Sushmita. Sushmita Biswas Sati, a pioneer of parametric and encoded architecture in her country, Bangladesh. She has gained entrepreneurial fame in architecture and songwriting. She has quite a good amount of experience in teaching workshops, as she has launched her first parametric design workshop in Bangladesh, and also there have been honorary faculties of parametric design for the first time in Bangladesh at Northern University of Business and Technology, Kalna, Bangladesh. And giving an introduction about Piyush Kumar Paul is a pharmacist, and he's working as an assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacy, Gono Vishwadiyalaya. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but you can correct me. Reputed private university of Bangladesh. He is an experienced scientist with expertise in drug delivery, formulation, nanotechnology, drug development, molecularity, imprint polymer, and lipid nanoparticles. So I would just like to invite Sushmita and Piyush to share the screen and talk more about their workshop.
You're muted.
She's on
Mrs.
mute.
Vida.
Mita, please unmute.
Yeah. So I have two forms of presentation today. One is the PDF form for the students' outcomes and what we can actually gain, and what is we need to do much research that we'll be talking on. And we have a video also, video documentary that consists of students thinking and how they actually work through the workshop, because everybody can see my screen now. So I want to just make sure. So everybody can see my screen now, please.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So actually, we this workshop motive and goal was to take as much as formula from the natural creation and from the nature itself, and get the data from those mathematical formula and put it to the action by the application of Grasshopper and by the application of Python and some other coding methods. And also we were using some R languages. So we showed our students how to actually take the theory and from the nature and from human and from the natural beings, like also the microorganisms, and take the formula and mimic them, not just mimic it 100%, because mimicking something 100% in the outlook and the form is too much complex, but also the functional things need to be resolved. So some proceedings, you can see that this is some sort of work that we had gone through these 8 days. And this is some form, this is some equation of taxi. And there is some seashell geometry which one of our students tried to mimic, like almost the same. And this is the flocking fishes, like fish swarm. And it is coming all the things, the difference is all the things, when we have done it in GH before, we were actually coding it in GH. But in this workshop, our goal was to pick it from nature and pick the original mathematics from the nature and understand the biological terminologies one by one, and then put it to the data extraction formula, and then put it to the coding application to make the design sense. So there are some, this is a leaf, this is a mimic of the texture and the patterns. This is a trial. This could be more more better, and this is some outcome that I think we could reach maybe 60%, and the 40% needs to research some more. And this is, you see, this is some minimal surfaces, and here are some traditional thing outcoming from Thailand also. And in the last session, I will show something very cool, which is interpreted from one of my musical works. So here is another proceedings from one of my students. This is like a bio community space, and we taught them like every terminology is related to biodesign, like biomimicry, bioornamentics, biomimetics, and biomorphosis, and bioinformed design, also insect-oriented architecture and microbes, and about the microorganisms, because we live in the world that we cannot see. That is my perspective. And I'm sure Dr. Paul has something to say, and I'm just briefing very shortly. And this is some outcome of some simulation from the grasshopper itself. You can see the mimic and mimic from the grasshopper, the direct mimic, and it has some functional uses also. So we not only mimic the things, we actually took the formula, mimic things, and also put some functional aspects so that it can be usable in the reality. So there are some other exploration. This is some movement mechanism my student has a work on already. And there is some more exploration you can see. And here is the in some form of seashell also, but it is coming from exactly the mathematical formula, and this is coded into grasshopper. This is the difference between the normal grasshopper thing and the the coded, I mean, from the mathematics to grasshopper, then Python, then into the architecture, into the functional abilities. So there is also some proceedings about the microorganism things. One of the students from China and one of the students from Tongji University has done this actually. And though it is a session of Bangladesh, and I am really very proud to have it here, have digital future in Bangladesh for the first time. And I'm really very honored to be here, because I actually struggled a lot when I was first have been to digital futures in 2018. And Professor Neil actually inspired me a lot, and I'm actually taking this into the action. And you can see, so I have lots of golden memories with Townsend University and Digital Futures itself. So here are some other explorations. Here you can see the veins and how it is coming from. So we taught all the terminologies of the patterns coming from the nature, coming from the human body and the organisms, and also the insect-oriented architecture, biomorphosis, biodesign, and every terminology we wanted to cover. And this is some of the working exploration you can see. And I want to have some words from Dr. Paul. Like we also taught students of nanotechnological advancement, and how it is correlated to this kind of observation, like to formula, like from mathematics to this nanotechnology. So I would like to have some words from Dr. Paul about our presentation. Then I will share my screen about the documented video. It will be more elaborate, and I have something to share in the last. It is about 2 minutes. You people will be loving it.
Thank you, Sushmita. Actually, it was a great like chance, and we had done it for the first time in our country, in Bangladesh. So our topic was, the theme was the biodesign, but we had to cover a lot of wide different topic, like biomimicry, then pattern theory, bioornamentics, microbial architecture. So being a pharmacist, my thesis was based on preparing some polymeric nanoparticles that was inspired from the like nature. We all know that there are lots of chemical events that are ubiquitous in different biological system, like antibody antigen and like enzyme catalysis. They all use the same theory. So I was trying to give some idea into the students, because they have the basic background of architecture, but since our objective was to get the idea and try to mimic it in the nanostructure level, so I think we should understand the nanotechnology very well also, because the natural system, or the nature, is the one of the best creator of nanomaterials. So, we need to explore this quite well. And also the biology, like we have lots of microbial structure, and that we don't see normal out with our naked eyes, but students were very enthusiastic, and they tried to grasp it within this short time. But they have that ability that they can get the idea and make something out of it, that Shushmit already shown. And within this time, they tried their best to get something, a new idea. And we enjoyed this whole workshop very well. And I would like to thank this digital future team for giving us the chance. And yeah, thank you all. So Sushmita will continue. Over to you. Sushmita, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. I am actually ending in some minutes, because I know it is very fast, and we should move faster. So here is some documentation, like we and me and Dr. Paul has told about those things that I have showed you. So this is some process that my students have gone through. So I'm playing this, and this is some sort of exploration that I have shown you, the process, the pattern, the coding, and the flockings, and really it is coming from the formula, from the nature and the microbes and the insect oriented forms. And also we have a lot of students from other countries this time, not only from Bangladesh, so also other students from different part of the countries, because like she's an Iranian student, and she has something to put it to the Seychelles structure. And there is some other simulation that is actually done in Python itself. And now I want to actually unmute a part so that you can see the musical exploration with the biological form. So can you hear any words? Can you hear any words? Any
No.
right now you can hear. So I'm just taking 2 minutes for that. Yeah. So this is actually one of my song, and this has not been released. And as you know, I am a musical artist in my country, and also I work internationally. So this music is by Protay Khan, and the lyrics and the tune is by me, and the voice is by me. And one of our participants has interpreted into this music into GH. So please enjoy. So this is the outcome of the this exploration, and I would like to thank all of the participants and all of the students, all of the PhD holders to have with me, and it was a very nice journey to all, and I'm hoping to have more in the next weeks. Like I have something in mind, and I hope to join more students, and I hope to bring more topics and bring more research to this platform. And I'm honored. Thanks, Professor Neil, and thanks, Ripple. Thanks, all the Digital Future team to give us the chance in a country like Bangladesh. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sushmita. Thank you, Piyush. It was really interesting. I could see that the students in your workshop were really happy, and they were really taking out some creative outputs. So congratulations to all of you guys. So because we are time bound, we need to kind of move in a bit quickly. Next up, we have Takbir Fatima. Takbir Fatima is an architect, educator, and entrepreneur. She is the director of the interdisciplinary experimental design and architecture studio, DesignerWare. Takbir created the Fractal workshop and Builderware. Has a master's. She has a MArch in Masters plus Urbanism from the Design Research Lab at the Architectural Association, AA School of Architecture, London. Takbir was awarded the Emerging Architect of the Year by NDTV Design and Architecture Awards 2016, and Design Aware was longlisted as Emerging Architecture Studio of the Year 2020 by the Design Awards. Takbir is also a TEDx speaker and has exhibited and presented the works and methods at various design events, including the Design Virtual Design Festival 2020. So I would just like to ask Takbir to share her screen and present our workshop.
Thank you. Thanks, Ripple, for the introduction. And first of all, thank you so much to Digital Futures for creating this event, Inclusive Futures. I really agree with the idea of making design education more accessible. I'd like to share a little bit about the workshop that I had the opportunity to teach as part of the Inclusive Futures event. This is the 30th in the 30th iteration in the Fractals workshop series, which I've been teaching since 2012 or so. It's called Analog Algorithms. So for the past 9 years, we've been to many different cities all over the world in person, mainly limited to the places where we could travel. But since last year, the workshop became online, and that gave us an opportunity to reach even more students all over the world, students, young professionals, and other participants as well. So this has been the 30th iteration. And the premise of the workshop is that many minds and many hands can come together to create something that is much greater than the sum of its individual parts. And another aspect to this workshop is that we don't know what the outcome is going to be. So we're following a kind of bottom-up design process in which we only worry about the process and not about the outcome. And the outcome is wholly unpredictable and not a predetermined outcome. So just the background of the workshop, it's been, always been in the same space, lots of people working together. It's almost like a collective authorship of ideas that used to be presented in, in a tangible exhibition space. But now because we were online, we decided that this workshop is very material and analog driven. It's not entirely a computational design workshop or a 3D modeling kind of workshop. It's more driven by material explorations that then get translated to analog algorithms, which the participants write themselves, and then they translate that into first analog and then digital computation. The workshop derives its name as well as its entire logic from the growth patterns in nature, particularly fractals. So nothing in nature is random. Everything is kind of coded and sort of depending on a certain algorithm that determines its growth, and that's what the entire logic is. And from nature, we translate that into mathematics and geometry and try to create systems that are recursive, self-similar, and multi-scalar, and also potentially infinite aggregation systems. So how do you get a group of people who has never met and who are located in different parts of the world? We had people participating from many different countries, and they came together and they sort of explored and did this material investigation in paper, because that is kind of ubiquitous and readily available everywhere at home as well. So one kind of method that I've adopted is having a kind of shared space in a drive where everyone would just, without editing, would just take pictures and dump their images without any sort of presentation, and then we see the evolution of the work of everyone over the 3 days of the workshop. And another aspect that we adopted was an offline number of days in which they could work offline, and then they would come back with ideas, and then we would put them together. One very important tool and exploration or method in the workshop is that of diagramming. And so these are some of the analog algorithms that have been created by different participants. And you can see that this is actually done, this is not generated by programming or by coding, but it's generated manually by the students or the participants, and they've put it together and cataloged a whole sort of different explorations based on different rules of growth that they wrote themselves. And as I mentioned earlier, the outcome remains unpredictable and unknown. So it's more of an investigative, open-ended design research and formal development that you can see based on changing rules and changing the analog algorithm, so to speak. You get different kinds of outcomes. And so these are some of the explorations by different participants, and you can see that they begin to sort of manifest into these aggregations, and the participants can take them to any level that they want. So there is no prerequisite skill that is required to participate in the workshop. It's completely from scratch, and all of the algorithms are written by the participants from scratch entirely. And the paper, almost the material, kind of dictates the some of the design decisions that they would have taken along the way. And you can see a whole range of different diagramming styles that they've adopted. So they could be something really super abstract to something that is a little more mimicking the material or the form that is being generated. So those colored dots that you saw earlier are representative of these prototypes of different ways that they've sort of folded the paper. And you'll see that a little later as well. And yeah, and so some of these are the different kinds of rules for interlocking and growth. And of course, there's a lot of color coding and numbers and letters that are used for them to kind of create the algorithm. And then you get a whole series of different outcomes from that. And it's a completely bottom-up design process rather than a top-down design process where you imagine what the design is going to be beforehand. So only after the outcome is arrived at, which is still not a complete or final outcome, but it's still open-ended and has scope for growth. And then some of these participants have sort of, these are some of the imaginings. What was missing in, in the virtual space was that shared exhibition, which is a collectively authored exhibition that we had earlier. So we decided to have this exhibition in the virtual reality space. And what's really great about virtual reality is that you're not restricted by scale and gravity and physics and these kind of things. So I'm just going to play a video for you that gives you a whole gist of the entire process of all the cumulative 7 days of the workshop.
I always like to make special forms and apply it to my architectural works.
I'm really looking forward to getting something from you guys.
So I'm working with geometry and
I have a sense due to their geometric beauty.
Fractals have interested me, like how
Geometry, specifically fractal.
looking forward to learn a lot about
Fatima. Okay, you're still out there.
Sorry, I think I got disconnected because it's raining here.
Ah, okay, it's fine.
I hope you can hear them.
Screen sharing is still, it is not on. Yeah, it's working now.
I'm gonna just share that again. So this is us making, exploring the paper. Right, so that was just a gist of the days that we spent together in this workshop. What I really like about the virtual space, which is on Mozilla Hubs, I'll be sharing the link as well here. What I like about this space is it's more of a collaborative kind of multi-authored space. And so everyone kind of owns a little bit of the space, and you can add and subtract and keep growing this space together. And at the same time, it's social VR, so you can enter the space and speak to each other and sort of communicate and sort of coordinate within the space itself. And you'll be able to see more of these videos on our channel, DesignAware, on YouTube. So thank you very much. Many thanks to Digital Futures for organizing this event, and I hope to be a part of it again. And thank you to all the participants and everybody who applied earlier as well. I had an amazing time teaching this workshop, and I hope we can do more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima. It was really inspiring to see all the works. Definitely, like paper becoming a tool of design exploration. I think I have been in that place, and definitely I'm still fascinated with paper as a tool to design many things. So I'm sure like you would carry on with your research and inspire more people with the output. So congratulations, amazing presentation, and really inspiring work. Yeah, thanks. Last up, we have Balwant Kaur and Sujay Kumarji. Just to introduce, Balwant is currently pursuing her research from Elisava, Barcelona, and holds an academic position as an assistant professor at Balwant Sheth School of Architecture, Mumbai, where she's actively involved in developing digital pedagogies for both graduate and postgraduate programs. Her work explores the multiplicity in the field of computational design and architecture education. She specializes in additive manufacturing processes and multiple design fabrication techniques. Talking about Sujay is an architect and technologist practicing in Mumbai. He graduated with a master's in robotics and advanced construction from IIT Barcelona and is currently practicing as a robotic fabrication consultant. He is presently exploring the possibilities of additive manufacturing, particularly concrete printing and its application within architecture. So over to you guys. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Ripple. I'll just start sharing my screen. Yes, you can see the presentation mode, right? Yeah, okay. Just, I'm sorry, just give me a second. Yes, this should be fine. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Ripple, and thank you for the opportunity, Digital Futures team, for opening up a platform for us, especially to discuss some of those methods which we probably skip out on while working with the prototypical level of or prototypical idea of Cartesian printers. So Machinic Crafts as a workshop was devised to look at these desktop printers, especially in the current pandemic when we're all situated in one single place without the access to larger facilities or robotic arms. So this workshop was opening up conversation, was meant to open up those conversations. So to briefly discuss the structure of the workshop, the workshop was divided into 6 days. During those 6 days, there were 3 important parts for us to discuss during the workshop. The first one being the understanding of the key concept in additive manufacturing, especially with Cartesian or desktop printers. What are the limitations in the conventional methods in which people are working with these printers, and what are the possibilities for someone to hack it, to make new methodologies which are in a way more programmable than just a top-down approach of form making. So the form finding began for us through these toolpaths that we were programming during the workshop. In order to briefly discuss the context of the workshop, we started looking at what are the current methodologies that are used in additive manufacturing, whether it's robotic fabrication or high-end printers for even medical aids and or even space architecture. Within that realm, we wanted to discuss how Cartesian printers can benefit by G-code manipulation by using certain computational tools. In this case, we were heavily dependent on Grasshopper and few of the plugins developed for Grasshopper to formulate the course structure and to carry out some of the processes. Needless to say, it was important for us to even understand the state of the art methodologies or some of these latest research projects, especially to mention Sena Mostafavi's PhD thesis on hybrid methodologies, some of the bespoke methods that are discussed in Ashish Mohite's work, or even Robert Stuart Smith's work at UPenn and at UCL are some of the inspiring methods that were informing our process during the workshop as well. And of course, low-cost 3D printers, which were also discussed by Ronald Ryle and Virginia Sanfratello during the opening remarks of the conference. These low-cost and affordable technologies are something were also important for us to discuss to begin our workshop. The workshop broadly tried to address the limitations in conventional 3D printing and how one can hack certain methodologies to do more with what industrially available or a commercially available 3D printer would do. Like I was discussing that we were looking at Grasshopper for Rhino and Silkworm plugin. We're grateful for the developers of both Silkworm and Pufferfish plugin, and also how these plugins could inform various methodologies, which we'll be discussing now about how we could formulate and catalog certain methods with these workflows to inform much more performative materials than just simply doing the form making process. So the form finding begins through these methodologies. So we were categorizing all of our studies into different days, and we had formulated the curriculum in a way to look at how variation in certain parameters could inform new methodologies of production. Students were constantly filling up and getting informed through this kind of a data sheet, which would tell about different parameters like layer height, speed, flow, what are the different delimiter values. Most of them are also getting informed from some of our precedent studies that we discussed during our lectures in the studios. The Silkworm plugin has a very simple workflow. You start to create a Rhino geometry. You get informed on different steps that will be taken to create a G code, which would inform your 3D printer. But what we tried to do a little bit more into this plugin, and we tried to work a little bit more, was to getting informed from what was printed, to try to look at the properties that would get generated because of these prints, and to again go back to our scripts and try to re-look at how we could design with these toolpaths. So some of the works by our students, the outcomes from our students were really, really interesting, and especially the important part of the important way of engagement for a workshop was through these prints and through lots and lots of photographs, lots of failures that happened during the workshop. We were remotely printing things for our students. So the only language we were talking with the printer was the G code, and between our scripts also. So that was a very interesting point for us in the workshop. Again, like we mentioned earlier also, the works produced by students had certain scripts or certain precedents that we had already formulated for them, but they were using their own sets of logic, the way they wanted to engage with the form to create the prototypes or to create these final forms. Again, some of the interesting results which happened as a serendipity also in this case were the cantilevers that were getting formed, and how by just G-code manipulation and by controlling the speed of printing, one could even start to engage with much more cantilever, which otherwise is not possible with the conventional 3D printing method. We tried to even create a certain collision test, which are almost an extension to the Silkworm plugin workflow that we were using, where we could actually predict before we are giving the prints where exactly would be the points where the printer would interfere or might disrupt the printing process also. Again, one of the other debugging tool that we developed for us was Cantilever Test. But to our surprise, it was very interesting to kind of see the results or the outcomes that with a slower speed and by simply manipulating the cantilever that we were getting, we could get textures formulated if the print was done upside down. So that was really interesting for us to see. Again, similar processes of making blobs and not just simply printing a continuous line is something which was taken in order to create different textures on the form. And thin shell structures or thin shells could be simply made much more strength, much more printable by adding blobs or doing the manipulation of the print toolpath. So the folds or blobbing was a method that was used to create thin shells, and of course the errors were the beauty of the whole the whole print. They were informative. The errors were almost like textures. They were also kind of generating new properties for these prints. All the tests were again tested for different kind of deformations that could happen, and like we discussed, errors and all the learnings that were happening for students as well as for us during the 3D printing process was these engagement. And one could then kind of say that if we pick up one of the techniques and combine it with another technique in 3D from our catalog that we had created of different methodologies, one could start to create many interesting forms which are, let's say, if not so foreseen in the 3D printing in the grasshopper process. So I will just play very quickly the video just to give summarize on our discussion. Again, seen over here are some of the clippets or some of the snippets which we were also constantly sharing with students. We had cameras set up, so it was quite interesting to work with them during this process. Yes, we are done. I think we ran quite fast. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pavleen. Thank you, Sujay. I think people who might be having a home printer would be definitely interested in experimenting with the toolpath and trying to like be more creative with their prints, even in the form of an error. So amazing work, really inspiring, also very informative in some ways, I think. So really, really cool. If we have any questions in our chat box, maybe we could take up some questions. Maybe we could just hear some comments from people who are present here.
Maybe Ripple, I could just kick it off. I mean, thank you for the presentations. That was incredible. I think it's really, there's no way of finding out otherwise what was been going on in these particular workshops. I mean, we're all been locked into our own thing, and to see this incredible industry and a really interesting range of different approaches. And I just could see a certain kind of incredible energy going on, and I can see a commitment as well from all the students. It was wonderful to see. Thank you, fabulous. I guess maybe I could ask Daniel a question, because I think the clip has been something that's just kind of appeared on the horizon very, very recently. And my students have been playing around with it, but we didn't teach it. And it's something that is, I don't know, it's, to me, it's still a bit of an enigma. And I wanted to maybe ask Daniel, what are the real potentialities of clip and what are the limitations? What are the real limitations of it? Because at one level, it very quickly can generate something bizarre, strange, but how far can it take us? Yeah, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. So based on our experiments, so Clip is really interesting in the sense that it's like one of the first sort of big models by OpenAI that combines text and image. What makes it sort of limiting in that sense is that it was trained by OpenAI and they have like essentially unlimited computational resources. So like if somebody wants to train Clip by themselves, maybe tailor it more to their own personal, I guess, design process, it wouldn't work out as great, or it would be limited in that sense. But I think the most interesting part about it is that it's like takes one step where we can now sort of use it in a way that image and text are pairs, so it can understand concepts. It also, once it gets feed all this information from the web, it's sort of building like this sort of, I think more like a consciousness where like it collects this repository. So when you feed it, it does understand things related to those images that we can probably say the same things. But in the case that we were using in our workshop was to like take that output and you can pick and choose, because some of the things, we're not going for accuracy, we're more going for like provocative experimental approaches that can inspire the designers, and then they can sort of get some input out of it, and then they get their own inspiration and work with that. So I think that would be my answer for that. I think the limitations is just the computational resources, but the output and the creativity is all up to the designer, and they can take it and explore it however they want.
Yeah, just to kind of pick up that a bit further. So what you're saying is, can you actually get under the hood, under the bonnet, as it were, and actually play around with things, or it's all within the system, so you can't really do much, because it's all the.
Yeah, you can't if you so OpenAI has shared the model. It's on GitHub, so you can go through it and like check it out. So you could get into under the hood. So there's been some sort of artists and researchers that have been playing around with that and sort of modifying some of the things. But that would take a little bit more of technical knowledge and coding about machine learning to be able to do that. So if you're just sort of a beginner, it's kind of like a little bit harder to get under the hood. And you might just be able to take like a pre-trained model, maybe from like a Colab notebook, and use that. But yeah, you could explore that. So I think that involves kind of more like a steeper learning curve.
But it seems to me some of the kind of the way in which you can kind of produce a kind of hybrid project where you're playing off Clip against some form of GAN seems to be the kind of the most productive way of opening it up. Is that right?
Yeah, so essentially, it's kind of like when you pair both of them. So you have a GAN that is generative, and it's going to generate some images. So you can also sort of pre-train a GAN network. In our case, we're using a VQ GAN that was pre-trained on WikiArt data set, and so it can generate images based on that. And once you generate that image based on that, you can use Clip. So what Clip is acting in this manner is kind of like a discriminator. And it's gonna like check that image out that is generated by the GAN and essentially compare it to like let's say like the text. And the text is paired with an image, so Clip knows like, okay, this image is gonna match to a text and image that are more similar. And once it takes that, then it's able to in a way sort of like tell the VQ GAN, okay, or like the GAN network, like you could also use a style GAN. It could tell it like, okay, modify the way so it generates an image more similar to the text. So I think that's kind of like the interesting part. But what we found in sort of like the experiments is that if you just use like a standalone kind of like GAN, you're gonna get just output like from like your base data set. But when you combine text, it's that you add like this other dimension. And since text has like combinations and there are millions of words, millions of sentences, all these combinations that can happen in this manner become like exponential. So when these combinations happens, the output that you get might be completely novel, and it's a sense that you won't expect it. So I think that was kind of like the fascinating part of combining these two methods. And I think that's where it becomes like exploratory and experimental, at least for artists and designers to be able to use that.
Sorry, one final question, just in terms of
Sure.
the timing. I mean, again, I'm not that familiar with it, but I've seen some results from my own students who've been doing this. But I mean, it seems to be pretty immediate. I mean, you can generate things pretty quickly using Clip. I mean, that could be both a good thing and a bad thing. But when I think about some of the projects, I mean, I've been tracking, for example, Daniel Bolojan's work on his Sagrada Familia work and his Deep Humble work, and that's like a 4-year project or something. I mean, he's really been working on this for some time, and yet you can come in here and very quickly generate something that is kind of intriguing. But it just worries me maybe that's kind of is something that's going to come and go, that people say, oh, well, that was interesting, and then move on to the next thing. I'm just wondering how you could really build upon this and really begin to integrate it into a kind of pipeline workflow, as it were.
Yeah, so that was kind of what Mayor and I set out to do, is that we wanted to see if we can incorporate it in like architectural design. Like, is it possible to actually be something that can be useful? And that was kind of like what we sort of proposed to the students, and some of the students took that to task. And we saw some interesting results. Like, you can go from like a sketch and then get like some sort of output. So it's like, I would say like you could incorporate it. It just depends like how far you want to take it. But it's also like the limiting part is that you would have to understand more or less how these technologies kind of work together. But I'm not sure yet. Like it's very unlimited at this moment. It seems like it has taken over like the art scene currently, or like the digital art scene. Like you see all these videos now being posted all over Twitter. So it's kind of fascinating. And I think what makes it more provocative than like say like the typical like style GAN latent walks or like the cycle GANs previously is that you can combine text and image. And now there's other sort of works that have been coming out of this sort of stream where like now you can use also audio in combination with image, or you can now also generate like video sequences, semantic video sequences based on text. So this is all kind of exploding at the moment. I think it's still in the early stages, so I couldn't sort of predict like where it's gonna take, because I guess it would depend more on like the creativity of the actual people to take that.
Yeah, just so okay. I'll ask my final question. When you say audio, you can take music, or you could work with. Is that what you're saying?
So there's a new model that came out. It's sort of like similar to using kind of Clip with like image, but now you can sort of input audio and it would generate like an image out of it. So they also like pair audio with like images. So now you can have that as well. So that's what I was saying. Like there's all these methods that are being developed now that are combining like multimodal training that are kind of fascinating, because if you think about it, it opens up a whole bunch of possibilities that maybe you could develop like a whole scene that includes audio, image, visuals, or anything of that sort.
Oh, that's. I mean, maybe Susmita should be putting her music on that and see. Thank you, Daniel. That's. I mean, I think that's just fascinating to me. Thank you. Thanks. I just will say also, if anyone wants to ask any questions, if you put a question on the YouTube, or yeah, we can respond to those.
I have a small question for Fatima. For Takbir, sorry. Takbir, I checked the Mozilla Hub's website. I tried to use it before, but it is so hard to get your data on the website. So how you make the connection between your own data, the workshop outcomes, and the hub itself?
I'm sorry, I'm having some problem with the connection because of the rain, but I'll try to answer it before I get disconnected, I guess. Yeah, so this is the challenge that we faced with Mozilla Hubs, is that multiple people can't work together, and you know, if you have to log in with a single ID. So the kind of aggregation was, I had to do it myself, and then later on, once the aggregation was done, there were some level of editing that can be done by the participants. Is that what you're asking?
No. Before I tried to make such an exhibition on the Mozilla Hubs, I had my 3D models on Sketchfab, but I couldn't upload them. But when I checked, you have the workshop outcomes. So my question was related to Mozilla Hubs, how you make that virtual exhibition on the platform.
Right. So we had to convert the models. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Spoke is the kind of back end of it, of Mozilla Hubs. So you have to convert the model to a GLB file and then upload it. We did have some issues with some of the other models, so it's not really a complete exhibition of all the works. There are about 3 which we still couldn't upload, so we're still figuring things out. So I think that's the good thing about it being open-ended, and we can continue to keep growing it. But yeah, the format has to be changed before you upload it.
Thanks.
No, maybe I just could ask another question. I mean, it just kind of trying to take out sort of a long-term view of kind of perspective on things. I think we have at least one. Ripple was an AADRL graduate, and I think maybe also Takbir as well. But one of the things I kind of find interesting is that so far, you guys, there have been certain centers, and they've either been in Europe on the whole, or in the States, or occasionally in a place like Australia and things. That are places which are kind of like hubs in some ways. The AADRL has been for some time now one of the central things, but there are other competitors that are built up, and now even in London, the Barton's become a big center and so on. But at the moment, we're still in a logic whereby kind of I think that those centers remain. And I'm just wondering at what point do we enter the next phase in which there could be a center in India, for example, or the Indian subcontinent at least, in the sense that, you know, I just thinking about the AA itself, what was interesting about the AA as a model is that all the professors or the instructors who at the AA went on to other schools, like Peter Cook, for example, or Nigel Coates and things, and Peter Salter, and they started sort of, the AA model began to spread. And I'm just wondering, what point do we get to the point where we actually get something that is kind of in India as such, and what is it that's preventing that from happening? I think Pavleen, I think you're doing your PhD at Elisava, right? And that's another hub, right? I mean, Barcelona's really been as another hub. But when do we get the point where we get this kind of feedback almost from India, where there's a central space in India that is, because you're doing this thing, but it's not kind of in a sense coordinated yet in terms of institution.
Yeah, go ahead, Takbir. Yeah.
Right.
I'll follow you. I have few comments on this, but I'll follow.
For me, I think, because there is no sort of this kind of computational revolution or something like that in India yet, there are a lot of us teaching different workshops, organizing different events, and maybe, you know, labs all over the country, but they're all decentralized and kind of sometimes they overlap, sometimes they're disconnected. I think our education system, if I can be honest, I believe that there is it's a kind of parallel subculture of computation that's going on that's not yet integrated into the mainstream architectural and design education. And I feel that that needs to really undergo a sort of overhaul. And that's why I tend to operate in the an outlier rather than be associated with any sort of institute or university.
Just to follow up from that, I mean, sorry if I'm public, but just a few years ago, this is back in 2000, again, 4 or 6 or something like, well, not a few years, many years ago, I remember trying to find out what was going on in India, because what is so interesting about India is that India really does produce a lot of computational experts. If you're wandering around San Francisco or Silicon Valley, you can hear more Indian accents than anything else. You can see cricket being played all over Southern California and Northern California. It's really astonishing. And I don't know why. Whenever I meet Indian computer scientists, I try and find out why this is, because it's a big mystery to me. I mean, not a mystery, mate, but it's a phenomenon for sure. But how you explain it, I don't know. That's one thing. But then the question is, why has this not infiltrated architectural culture, architectural schools? And I found out those many years ago that there was really nothing happening in terms of computation, in terms of architecture. But if you look at the kind of the Indians who are working in major firms around the world, I'm thinking here about Shajay and his brother, Shajay Bhushan and his brother at the Zaha Code. There have been a number of people, like Samir Kashyap, who was the guy who was behind much of Gary Technologies. There are Indians in the West playing a really significant role, but somehow there's been this kind of hermetic world of architecture in India hasn't been infiltrated by the digital at all. And I guess that you have to say that it must be the institution itself that is resisting that in some senses.
Okay. Neil, I'm glad we are having this conversation, because this reminds me of your similar question during the Fab Biennale in 2018. Actually, over the last couple of years, there's been a significant kind of change that has happened when it comes to the education, and the few institutes setting up certain methodologies in which you're working more within the constraints of what the recommendation by council is saying, but you're still kind of formulating your own curriculum. You're still kind of reflecting back on what's happening in West. You're inviting, you're having symposium, and also I do not want to do name dropping over here. Maybe I can have a good conversation with you over email or something. But I do feel that there are things that have changed and have been changing. In fact, for that matter, Fab Biennale, the whole process of formulating and even calling certain architects and certain people were also part of a practice. And we as a team were working towards it. So it's a very interesting journey. I'm sure I'm going to have a long conversation on that with you. But one of the major reason why some of these, whether it's talking about the digital fabrication methodologies and all, some of the reasons why Indian pedagogy has not been able to adapt is definitely the access to these facilities. So currently, we are struggling for the last 2 or 3 years to get just a robotic arm because of multiple constraints, because of financial as well as other kind of reasons, institutional constraints and all. But yeah, I do agree with you that there are more Indians doing such interesting work in institutes in Europe and all than reflecting back and coming over here. So so yeah, definitely, but there is a shift, and soon with these workshops also, and especially with the last 1 year, more people are well versed with many terminologies which were missing for us. For example, style GAN was so missing for us for a long time, to majority of us, of course. So yeah.
I'm just wondering whether, I mean, typically the way that things have changed is you get one particular individual who becomes the dean or chair in a particular school, and they institute wholesale change. I mean, I think that it's not so easy to do certain things as you good in the past. I remember that Peter Cook, when he went to the Bartlett, in 2 weeks he basically kind of cleared the whole place out and instituted a new regime that completely transformed the Bartlett from being a pretty straightforward school. To being something much more kind of dynamic, and it's since gone through another iteration, I think, through more through a kind of collective thing, and especially been drawing upon some of the talent coming out of the AA. So, but anyway, the Bartlett was transformed. The same thing actually happened for Columbia in New York. I mean, before Bernard Shumme, it was also a fairly solid school, and it was dominated by more kind of conservative figures like Kenneth Frampton and so on. And suddenly Bernard came in and really shook the place up. I mean, people don't really. I think that's been his most extraordinary contribution, not his buildings or his theory writing, but what he did at Columbia. And it's still it's lost a bit of its momentum, but it's still become it's significant. And so on. You could find other places. I think that Wolf Pricks at the Angevanta did the same thing. He kind of he brought in Zaha, he brought in Greg Lynn and Sanford Quinter, and suddenly Angevanta became this kind of really pulsating thing. But one could also see similar things happening. I don't know. I think that Hanan's been quite successful at SciArc, and so on and so on and so on. So it might just be it's a generational thing that we need someone who reaches a certain, and I think you can literally put the clock going, right? Because it started off almost with the AADRL, which I think I was there. I think 1999 or something that AADRL started. MTech started 2002, I think it was, and you just kind of add the time to that. So the students who are coming to that, when they reach the point where maybe they could become directors of a school, maybe that will be the catalyst of change that will suddenly change things. But there are, of course, in each place, there are kind of institutional sort of structures and regulations that limit the possibility of what you could do. But I'm just wondering if it's all of a sudden we might see that generational change when Chargé's generation really starts sort of taking over and really bringing that knowledge and feeding it back into Indian schools.
I think what I would just like to comment on this. So, I mean, I have been teaching in some of the institutes in India, and definitely we have seen this gap of kind of studies or output that we generate back in ADRL and the kind of output that we generate here. I think there needs to be a better comparison and better standard set by the institute itself. I think that's some lacking point that we can see here. Apart from the fact, I mean, we are trying, as Takbir suggested, that people are quite disintegrated because of different places and because of some of their space-bound things, and so there is no integration of those knowledges, and therefore having more collaborative approach is something is kind of lacking in these in a place like India. However, I think because now people are more accessible to social media, and since when they see that there are people from Indian community trying to do various things, I mean, mostly, I mean, I'm very much inspired from Shajay and the kind of works that he has generated over time, and I think he has been my mentor from quite a long time. So it's kind of a learning for me as well, and I'm trying to do my best to communicate a similar thing to my students, and definitely people like me, not particularly just from AADRL, but they are doing the same thing. So I feel like we can see some instincts of youth getting interested in this practice and feeling more aware of the facts and the kind of community that exists at some place, and trying their best to be a part of it, or at least stay closer to it. So it kind of helps them professionally, as well as helps them in developing their own scope of ideas and vision. So I would say that it won't be so long when we see more Indians being greater participants of computational design in India. Definitely, I mean, it would be I would say within the next 5 to 10 years, it would be rare if any institute might not produce any computation or digital. I mean, this would be something that would really come in soon. And now I feel like a lot of when I see Mayur and Daniel's work, I can see people are trying to collaborate in different fields, and those collaborations really inspires a lot of people. At least I feel more inspired, and I can pass on to this a little bit of inspiration to the people whom I know. So I think it would soon be seen in the Indian community as well.
Maybe I could just pitch in something else. I don't want to take over the conversation, but in a way, I can see the sort of frustration that in the years gone by that must have existed, in the sense that if you want to try and do something, the conditions are just not right in a certain parts of the world. I recall this must have been, I don't know, about 12 years ago. I'm just guessing here that I gave a lecture at in Romania, Bucharest. There was those days. I think they had several more schools just started, but essentially there was one big school called Ian Mincu in Bucharest that was there were some very smart people there, very, very, very talented individuals, and yet there was something that was kind of like the frustration was the kind of infrastructure, in the sense that the professors weren't supporting it, and so I remember giving this lecture, and I remember exactly one particular question that I got from and I was showing the stuff that we were doing in Dessau at the time. I was showing the stuff that Elisa Andruszek had been doing, and all this kind of the new stuff that was out there. And I got one question from one of the students in the audience, and he said, "But isn't the straight line sacred?" And I just kind of thought, "Oh my God, no, isn't the straight line sacred?" Someone had clearly told him that. But the funny, strange thing is that there was someone else in that audience who didn't ask a question and was very quiet. And something happened. I don't know what I did. I must have triggered something off. And that was Daniel Bolojan. And what he did was basically saying, "Okay, I've had enough of this. I'm going to Vienna." And he went to Angevanta, and then he started working for Wolf Bricks and so on. So it was almost like, out of the frustration, all you could do is go somewhere else, like AADRL or Angevanta or something, and do something. So I guess that's the kind of that's traditionally been, and I assume that's behind much of what you guys have been doing, going to IAC and other places where these things are kind of open out there. You can really be part of a community, but not in India itself.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you completely on that. People who are thinking a certain way are drawn to other centers where that kind of thinking is happening. So, and we call this the brain drain in India. So people who are, maybe they're not finding the kind of conducive environment, they go somewhere else. So, and this is not just in computational architecture. There are, Indian researchers and Indian doctors and politics everywhere. You will find Indians all over the world. So I think because we have such a big population, but I think there is definitely a demand. It's not that because the students are demanding it. The students and the young professionals, they want to learn computational skills and this way of thinking. Maybe it's not being met by the institutes or the universities, but it's being met by other professionals who are working kind of independently. And I think that there is going to come a time when these two have to merge and they have to come together, like Ripple said.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of when you get the critical mass, when suddenly you go through a kind of phase transition and something emerges because of that. But I completely agree with you. It's a kind of bottom up process. You need to. It's a kind of groundswell from the students themselves. And
also,
but
what
I
said is still true, I think, because she said that due to a lot of budget issues and maybe people being remote, they don't have access to the equipment and all of that. We can definitely teach computation online, and that's been really successful with Digital Futures. But yeah, things like physical, digital fabrication and prototyping, these things are still not readily available to us. When I started the Fractals workshop in 2012 or so, we couldn't do we couldn't do laser cutting. So that's when we decided to use material that is readily available in bulk. So that's the main reason why we did that. And it's still kind of slow, I think.
So I'm just thinking to what extent now we're using this and other platforms in a way, whether that could be something that could be helped to break down that resistance, because once you're working on the cloud, you can use resources elsewhere. I think that Samin Hammer's been exploring how you can use AR to work remotely in terms of robotics and so on. And if you could get access to GPUs elsewhere in the world, you could do that. In some ways, it just seems to me that this could well be part of a catalyst of change. Basically not just simply the ideas, but actually using the possibilities afforded by the network to break down those physical material disadvantages, because this what I want to say one thing that's really clear to me is that this comes I've from teaching in Dessau, where a lot of students go because they simply can't afford to go there, but the talent is everywhere in the world, really everywhere. I had such incredible students from Bangladesh, I mean really talented, and they'd all been offered a place at the AADRL and just couldn't afford to go. But so talent is there, and it's simply kind of a question. We just hope that we can somehow begin to open up and use this platform to try and democratize in some ways, or at least give access to people in new ways.
I think, Neil, that also reminds me a little bit of what Fab Labs, when Neil Gershenfield was setting up different Fab Labs across the globe, and even how IAC and its journey started. I mean, I'm not an IAC person, I'm more of a Elisaba alumni, but I know for a fact the origins of the whole institute began with the Fab Lab. So I think it's interesting if institutes themselves have a shared facility. So institute in Mumbai have one single shared facility. So affordance actually becomes a bit of a answer to what we are discussing. So sharing becomes that kind of an answer to affordance. And another thing definitely is that, irrespective of the fact that all these all our discussions on virtual platforms and even virtual mediums of fabrication and trying to look at things, the engagement with that material is crucial. So one just cannot avoid not having a fabrication lab. And yes, we do have beautiful carpentry labs, we have beautiful clay lab. It would be fun to then have that clay knowledge or the knowledge of timber to get converted into that latest robotic fabrication. So we all are attempting to now start a moment where we as institutes can share facility. I hope it gets soon materialized.
So just let me be a bit provocative here in saying, I don't think it started with the Fab Labs. I think it started with the original condition, to my mind, because IAC was somewhere. I one year I went to talk to ESAC, IAC, and Elisava and Metropolis, 4 different schools in Barcelona. But anyway, the reason almost why they're there was partly because Barcelona is a great place to study, of course. But the other reason why those institutions are there is that mainstream education is failing. The mainstream education is failing, and they're not teaching certain things. So these things cropped up, as it were, as to address that balance. And hopefully the idea is that they eventually cancel themselves out once the message gets through, and you don't need IAC. But it seems that you still need it, and it goes back here to the kind of the question that was a point that Philippe Morel once raised about what Digital Futures is trying to do, and is in a sense, the reason why Uber exists is the taxi industry, the failure of the taxi industry. And interestingly, apparently the guy who developed Uber initially went to the taxi industry and they weren't interested. No, but the point being that really the role of Uber is in the end ultimately to try and improve the taxi industry as a whole. And to my mind, this is a comment that Philippe made, was that the role of Digital Futures is to try and improve education as a whole. So let's hope that somehow that some of this will have an impact where we don't need Digital Futures anymore. We don't need this, and somehow we can. It will have cancelled itself out because the message would have spread across everywhere. Ripple, there's a question in the chat. Do you want to?
Yeah, so there's a question for Bhavin and Sujay by Giovanna Elizabeth. So for 3D printing workshop to personalize the printed and have the results that show us, it's necessary to change the nozzle or other parameters for better results. And if the code to make and is the code open source, so to be made is open source or not?
Okay. Yes, you can always hack your printer by changing the nozzle if you want to go a little bit thicker in terms of the flow that you're getting or the final print that you're getting. You can definitely change your nozzle. That's absolutely fine. The printers that we were using were Ender 3 printers, and most of them are easily hackable. You can just disassemble them, and all the codes are open source. The software itself, Silkworm, is open source, but all the codes that were shared during the workshop are also available on our drive links. We'll make it accessible as far as possible. The YouTube videos, the work, everything is also uploaded, so you can go and have a look at Machinic Crafts page as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Noli. So I think we had some good conversation, lots of topics to talk about, and also to think about in more like Indian context. I would like to close this event, and I think, I mean, I would I'm glad that all of you guys are here and you presented your work. So thank you all for presenting and sharing your workshop objectives and all the students' work. To all our viewers, we hope to bring you more topics every week. We have hope to spread more awareness and get more people engaged in this design research process and grow our community. Also, if you guys would be more curious about digital future, you guys could catch us on Discord. We have our link shared in the description, and maybe we'll also put it in our conversation sections. So join in and stay a part of our growing community. Thanks, everyone.
Ripple, maybe just a couple of quick comments, just to repeat what I said at the very beginning.
Yeah.
First of all, just we are growing the community, so if anyone wants to come and join the team, it's obviously there's people volunteer because they're but we'd like to increase the team slightly because as we're growing more and more. So anybody who's interested in being involved, that means kind of like being part of the team that you can't see when you, but there's a team that's behind everything. An incredible amount of hard work from really incredibly motivated, talented individuals. We've got a really amazing team, and it's anyway. But we would like to build upon that. So if you're interested, please send us maybe a CV, just a CV to Digital Futures info at digitalfutures.world, and it'd be great to be part of that. We basically meet once a week, and we plan things, and of course we have a session on Saturday. But it'd be great to involve people, especially kind of, I guess, young kind of PhD graduates, kind of actually a bit like today's session, a bit like AA, DRL, and so on, graduates and so on. So there's that. Secondly, next week we have really actually it's going to be a very interesting session. And I've got to say, one thing I really love about this particular Inclusive Futures is the fact that we've actually been more inclusive and had a number of workshops in different languages. It's I know the Indian ones are all in English, but it was great to have some in Arabic and Farsi and so on. And next week we're going to have a roundup of the sessions that came from Africa and West Asia, Middle East as it used to be called. So that'll be happening. Then we'll carry on. We've got 3 or 4 more of those afterwards, where each of our regional managers will be presenting the work that's been produced. And to my mind, this is fascinating, just to see the industry of everyone's been doing the whole time during the Inclusive Futures event. So it's an amazing possibility. After that, then we're getting back into our normal kind of routine and so on. But so we're looking forward to other events. So I just want to finish with a vote of thanks, first of all, to Ripple for being our regional manager in the Indian subcontinent. Secondly, to everybody who's contributed to all the instructors here. And it's really wonderful to see such talent and such enthusiasm, energy, and thirdly, to the students who are part of that particular those particular workshops, who were really actually working very hard, and very interesting results came out. And then finally, to the background team, the iceberg team that we don't see much of, who are behind all this. And it's really great to sort of see that and let's see. What I want to do is I almost want to come back in 10 years' time and look back on what the impact of Digital Futures with. I want to finish off with a comment that because I was there at the AA when Brett Steele was the 10th anniversary of the founding of the AADRL, which actually has proved to be an incredibly influential space of, and I mean, there are other, it has competitors now, right? But I mean, and he said, it's often when you're looking at the future, it doesn't, you don't often look back at the past, what's been happening. But I think it's important to sort of see the future and the past kind of connected in some way. I always like this comment that Wolf Pricks makes. I think the comment is, in 2 days' time, tomorrow will be yesterday. We're all part of a process, and I think that this is how things happen. It's through this kind of gradual incremental change. And then you look back and say, wow, that was incredible. So hopefully in 10 years' time, we'll be able to look back and see the impact of digital futures. And hopefully, especially in the Indian subcontinent, I think it would be incredible if we could really see the full potential of, there's such talent there, the full potential realized in some way. So, so thank you everyone for this. I'm always left feeling, especially with our team in Digital Futures, that the future is in good hands. And today I saw that absolutely explicit. There's such enthusiasm, such talent out there. So thank you for everyone for all your commitment. Thank you, Ripple, and thank you for the team elsewhere. It's been great to see all this today. So we look forward very much to Ahmed and Aya next week. So thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks to
And
Digital Futures.
I would like to just add one sentence that Digital Futures platform, we need Digital Futures platform to get more support, to add the syllabus of parametricism, computational design, and various other backgrounds to the architectural education in our universities in the countries like Bangladesh, and also more practice for the affordable parametricism, and so that people do not afraid of the cost. So we need actually Digital Futures platform support very much at this moment for the better future in the next 5 or next 10 years. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're muted.
See you next week. Looking forward to Ahmed and Aya's presentation. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.
See you. Bye.